Welcome back to Centered. Again, my name's Zach, and we're about to kick off week 3, which answers the question, "Who are we?" And just so you remember, Centered is all about understanding worldview, and our working definition of worldview is what you believe about the most meaningful and important questions in life. Whether or not we think we have a worldview, we all have answers to these questions. And so today we're going to explore who are we. But before we get into it, we just want to remind you that and give you this tool of the grid. And so we're going to throw the grid graphic back on the screen, and remember that as we evaluate worldviews and we compare them one to another, this is a way to help us compare them evenly and honestly and consistently. So here's the screen, and the first thing is claims. So as we and continuing on as you go through life, as you look at a worldview and you seek out these questions, you look at the claims that they're making when they answer the questions. 2, the second part of our grid is reasons. Every worldview has reasons why they make such claims, and this is just asking the question, what are the reasons? 3 is implications, and the way we remember that is if and then. So if this is true, then it means this. And 4, actions, because worldviews aren't simply about thoughts and knowledge. It's about the way we act. So our actions are inspired by our worldview. So at the end of our last session, like always, we had a practice for you guys to have during the week. And the practice was to take a photo of something that sparked a sense of awe or sparked a sense of wonder in your life. And it could have been anything simple or complex. But if you did that and you have that picture, it would be awesome for you to go to the message board and just post that on there. We'd love to see what your practice looked like through the week and what it was that kind of sparked a new sense of wonder in your life. But today we're gonna look at the question of who are we as humans. So just like every week, now we want to go to a film that was created by our creative arts team.
Have you ever seen this? It puts life in perspective, doesn't it? Not only that, it slips in a philosophical point that goes something like this. You're not that big of a deal. Science popularizer Bill Nye the Science Guy, in an acceptance speech he delivered when he was named Humanist of the Year, captured the same idea. He said, "I'm just another speck of sand, and Earth, really in the cosmic scheme of things, is another speck. And our sun, an unremarkable star, nothing special, another speck. And the galaxy is a speck. I'm a speck on a speck, orbiting a speck among other specks amongst still other specks in the middle of specklessness. I am insignificant. I suck." While we all may admire the humility, even the reality of seeing ourselves as specks of sand, it's not exactly a pep talk if you happen to be searching for the meaning of your life. And we all know when he says, "I suck," he's really saying, well, we suck. If you're a human being, you're not that big of a deal. More importantly, he's answering one of life's most meaningful and important questions, a worldview question. Who are we? Are human beings special, or are we just specks? We know Bill Nye's answer. Others have said similar things. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "I see no reason for attributing to man a significance different in kind from that which belongs to a baboon or a grain of sand." To be fair, Nye, Holmes, and others are, at best, simply trying to be consistent with their answer to the other, more foundational worldview question: where did everything come from? Depending on your answer to that question, what you think of the value of people, well, it'll follow. If everything came from nothing, no design, no purpose, no overarching reason, and we also happen to be infinitesimally small compared to the universe, it's easy and logical to conclude that people aren't any more significant than grains of sand. But the problem gets more complicated when we follow that idea onto its real-life implications. Think about an issue most of us care deeply about: human rights and equality. Thomas Jefferson's opening words to the U.S. Declaration of Independence establishes the case for freedom and self-rule on the idea that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. What if Jefferson built his argument on Bill Nye's or Oliver Wendell Holmes' ideas? Imagine the document might sound like this. Since all of the evidence points to the fact that human beings are specks in a sea of specklessness and have no more significance than a grain of sand, and so almost definitely suck, it makes perfect sense for us to risk our lives and our honor to form a country where those same specks can continue to suck and live insignificant and meaningless lives in freedom. That doesn't have quite the same soul-stirring quality. The great ancient Hebrew songwriter King David pondered the same things Bill Nye did, but he reached different conclusions. He sings these lyrics to God. "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them?" Even though he didn't know the full extent of the size of the universe, he could feel the same sentiment just looking up into the night sky and wonder why God would care about people. But he answers the question differently. First, he concludes that the heavens aren't there to communicate about us. He writes, "The heavens declare the glory of God." In other words, they aren't there to comment on the glory of man. But he turns around and affirms the importance of mankind by adding, "God, you have made people a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor." His answer to the question, "Who are we?" is, human beings are special because the Creator has declared them to be special. Or in Thomas Jefferson's words, we have been endowed by our Creator. Before that idea is dismissed as lightweight, simplistic religion, remember that Thomas Jefferson called it self-evident. Also consider the immense amount of outside evidence that we see every day that says human beings really are special. Albert Einstein said, "The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is at all comprehensible, and human beings have the gift of comprehending." We can work out vast formulas on chalkboards and comprehend everything from supernovas to subatomic particles, or we can take those mental abstractions, combine them with ingredients we've discovered in the dirt, and convert them into a near infinite number of things, from hairdryers to Ferraris. We can build flying machines that weigh tens of thousands of pounds. We can carry hundreds of passengers 40,000 feet in the air, moving 500 miles per hour while they can all relax and watch reruns of The Office. We can create entire worlds from our imaginations. We can dance. Well, some of us can dance. We are the only creature on Earth that can control fire. We craft instruments from trees and convert their sounds into classic vinyl. We store food in freezers and figured out how to make snow cones. We sit on furniture, ride on roller coasters, post pictures on Instagram. We've discovered the periodic table. We perform surgery. We love sports. We love each other. We build skyscrapers and art. We ski behind boats or down mountains, and we even invented the Pop-Tart. Yes, we're small, but maybe G.K. Chesterton had it right when he said, "It is quite futile to argue that man is small compared to the cosmos, for man was always small compared to the nearest tree." Maybe smallness has nothing to do with value. We don't look at the smallest among us and think, "You're just a speck, you suck." We actually feel the opposite. So, why should we say that about any of us?
So as you watched that film, did anything strike you, or did anything stick out to you? Was there anything that was compelling or moving, or did it raise any new questions in your mind? Just as we go through these films, just jot those down as you watch. I know for me, one thing I loved about the film is just towards the end, that quote from G.K. Chesterton that talks about maybe smallness has nothing to do with value. I just thought that was really cool. But the big question today, in light of that film that we're going to explore, is who are we? And we're going to look at a few different ways that our culture tries to answer that question and then put it through the grid. So in the film, you heard a number of different claims that were made about who, different ways that culture tries to explain who we are. They said things like we're specks, we are highly evolved animals, we're nothing more than a mind that's basically a computer. And then we also heard a part of the Christian worldview answer as well that we'll continue to explore. But first, we want to look at the very first claim that we heard in there, and it's this idea that humans are specks. So looking at this idea of humans as specks, we're going to compare and contrast two different people. And one is Bill Nye, which you heard from in the video, and then also King David. We want to put them side by side and see how their claims stack up and all that. So one story, which is Bill Nye's story, falls into the worldview, which is probably close to what we would call naturalism or materialism, which says that basically all there is in the world is stuff, molecules and atoms and particles and chemicals crashing together to make things. Nothing beyond that, no God, no soul, that kind of thing. So materialism's answer to who am I would be something to the effect of nothing more than a combination of chemicals and stuff, particles, matter, again, just chemicals reacting in your brain, no soul. And then there's David's story, and in the book of Psalms, we're going to look at that. But first, we're going to put up this Bill Nye quote and explore what he says. Bill Nye says, "I'm just another speck of sand, and Earth, really in the cosmic scheme of things, is another speck, and our sun, an unremarkable star, nothing special, another speck, and the galaxy is a speck. I'm a speck on a speck, orbiting a speck among other specks, among still other specks in the middle of specklessness. I am insignificant. I suck." Okay, keep that in mind as we read David's words in Psalm 8, 3 through 6. And I'm putting up the Voice translation because it fits well here. And if you don't know, David was the second king of ancient Israel around 1000 BC. So this is, significantly in the past here. So Psalm 8 says, "When I gaze to the skies and meditate on your creation, on the moon, stars, and all you've made, I can't help but wonder why you care about mortals, sons and daughters of men, specks of dust floating about the cosmos. You place the Son of Man just beneath God and honor him like royalty, crowning him with glory and honor. You ordained him to govern the works of your hands, to nurture the offspring of your divine imagination. You placed everything on earth beneath his feet." And so now we want to go through, again, keeping both of those in mind, and they should both be in your participation guide. I'm going to go through a series of questions, and as I do, you can just jot down your answers. If you need more time, feel free to pause and think a little bit more on them. But the first question that we'll put up is, what do you notice about the similarities and differences in how these two men view themselves or people? What's interesting is that it's almost like Bill Nye and King David were saying essentially the same thing, but they meant two completely different things by it. They had their views had two very different implications. And that leads to the second question. What is the difference between what Bill Nye and King David see as the implications of living in a giant universe? Again, that question is, what's the difference between Bill Nye and King David, the way Bill Nye and King David see the implications of living in a giant universe? So you may have written something to this effect that the way Bill Nye, the implications of his belief, the way that he sees the implications of a giant universe is that he sees humans as insignificant specks, right? That's what we see from the quote. If we think if then, we would answer, he might answer something that says, if the universe is giant, then we must be insignificant specks. But King David sees it completely different. Again, back to this G.K. Chesterton quote that I loved about the value must not be on the size of things. The size and grandeur of the universe causes David to worship because he's blown away by the fact that the God who created it all loves and relates to his people. So he sees, when he looks at the world, he sees this same giant cosmos, and he sees man as really small, but he sees man as infinitely valuable He might argue if our Creator has the power to create all things and cares about us at the same time, and gives us dominion and that kind of thing over the earth, then we must hold infinite value. Okay, the first thing we looked at was humans as specks. That's one claim that is commonly made in reference to this question. The second claim that is often heard in our culture is that humans are nothing more than highly evolved animals. And to get us thinking through this question or this claim, I want us to do a quick activity. And we'll have two things on the message board this week. One would be that your practice, and the other thing would be this. Give yourself about 60 seconds. Again, you can pause and wait and take as much time as you need. But come up with a list of ways that humans are unique from animals. How are we different in kind than animals? And then, do that list and then come back, put some of your answers on the message board, and we'll see what people have to say. So excited to see what you guys put and what you guys are putting down on the message board at One Life Anywhere. Some of the things that I came up with, just real quickly off the top of my head, were that they use complex tools. We're the only animals that control fire. We invent better transportation methods. We mass produce food, medicine. There's so much more. The list goes on. And again, go to One Life Anywhere, follow the centered thread, and post your answers there. So there are a number of reasons why, just from the most basic understanding, we see that we are different in kind than other animals. The third claim that we often hear in our culture is that humans are minds, just minds. And so this is another claim that materialists or naturalists would make, and it would basically say that there's no difference between our mind and action, the mind and self, the mind and thought, that we're essentially pre-programmed computers with no free will, which again would eliminate soul and all of that. And so to consider how you might align or disagree with this position, answer this question. Think about this, and it'll be on the screen, but think about this and see how you would answer. So here's the question. If some brilliant scientist created a procedure that could upload your entire mind into a robot that even looked and sounded exactly like you, would that be you? Why or why not? And this question helps us think through the answer of soul, really, because if you argue that the robot, if you think about it and you say, oh, the robot is you, yeah, that's probably true, then you're probably coming from a materialist worldview, that all we are is mind and matter. But if for some reason you think, no, the robot, that's not me, it might point to the fact, even though you realize it not, that you might believe in some kind of concept of soul or a spiritual self outside just our mind or our brain, that we're not merely that. So that question, and that's a fun one to ask other people too, just to see what they say. But that question can help you think through those claims. So now we want to move past claims to the second thing on our grid, which is reasons. And we're going to look at the Christian worldview, and the Christian worldview denies that we're merely insignificant specks. It denies that we're nothing more than highly evolved animals, or that we're merely our minds alone. Instead, the Christian worldview claims that every human has inherent worth and value because they're created in the image of God. And you may have heard that phrase, image of God, before, or Imago Dei. Sometimes that's tied to the pro-life movement. You hear Imago Dei, but it's this idea of made in the image of God. And so we wanted to just lay out why the Christ-centered worldview makes such a claim. Why do we say we're made in the image of God? And it comes from the very beginning of the Bible, in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. And so we're going to put on this passage on the screen, Genesis 1, 26 and 27. And this is in the creation story. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animal, and over all creation that move along the ground.' So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And so it gives this passage, this creation story, gives this claim that man is made in the image of God. And we say that, but have you ever wondered what that might mean? I know I have. Like, what is the writer trying to get at to say that we are made in the image of God? Does that mean we look like God? Does that mean we act like God? What exactly does it mean? And so as I've explored that question, I found a writer and teacher, professor at Wheaton College named Dr. Walton. I think he put some really good language around this idea of what it means to be made in the image of God. And he brings it back to its sort of ancient context where it was originally written. So here's what Dr. Walton says. He says, in the ancient Near East world, which is the time and place when Genesis would have been written, an image was believed to carry the essence of that which it represented. An idol image of a deity would be used in worship of that deity because it contained the deity's essence. So this would not suggest that the image could do all the things that a deity could do, nor that it looked the same. Rather, the deity's work was thought to be accomplished through the idol. So in light of that, again, we can keep it up on the screen for a minute and just look at this quote. And if Dr. Walton is correct, what does it mean that humans are made in the image of God? I think one of the things it means, at least among others, it's more than just this. But I love the last line there where he says the deity's work was thought to be accomplished through the idol. And then another interesting thing that we see in Genesis is in verse 29, and this kind of points to a difference in kind between humans and animals. In verse 29, God says to his image, to us, I give you. And it seems like that's not a big deal, but this phrase is used with nothing else in all of creation. The fact that we exist as beings that can be addressed as you and not impersonally as it indicates a relationship with God. And the fact that he says, I give you, indicates a relationship. So maybe you're thinking that the sole fact that the Bible kicks off in Genesis, this first creation story, and says these words, create an image of God, isn't strong enough to claim that people have inherent worth and value. And I can understand that a little bit if that stood alone. But even a bigger marker of that, I believe, is when Jesus comes into the picture and what are the implications of Jesus stepping in for us. And so let's just imagine for a moment that it is true. So you have to do a little exercise here if you don't believe it, but let's just believe for a moment, for the sake of this question, that Jesus is God in the flesh. So that's what the Christ-centered worldview believes, that Jesus came to earth, God in flesh. How does the fact that God became one of us, gave us an example of what it means to be our truest self as human beings, and then sacrifice himself for all our sake? What do those three things that the very presence of Jesus, what does that speak to the value and worth of humans? Or stated another way, if it's true, what does the very fact of Jesus' existence imply about human beings? And I don't know what you think. I hope you have time to process that a little bit. But to me, that points, that fact alone, the fact that that God would come to earth and do all the things that Jesus did, points to our worth more than anything else. Okay, so we've looked at claims now. We've explored a number of different ways that culture answers this question of who are we as human beings. We've looked at reasons why the Christian worldview believes that we do have some kind of inherent value, that we're not merely animals or merely computers or insignificant specks. And now we want to look at the third thing on our grid, which is implications. And again, that's answering the question, if this is true, if this claim is true, then this is true as a result. And because we have to remember that worldview claims don't just exist in a vacuum. They all have implications that spread throughout all areas of our lives. So let's consider a few implications surrounding this question. and we'll just examine a few claims and what it means. So, and we'll put this up on the screen, and you can think through it. You feel free to pause if you need to. But if we're living a worldview consistently, that means that we are actually letting the implications come from the claims. What might some implications be of human worth if, one, we believe humans are just highly evolved animals? Two, what are the implications if we believe human beings are nothing more than matter? Then what? Or three, what are some of the implications of human worth if we believe that we are made in the image of a creator God who cared enough about us to enter humanity, sacrifice himself to restore the relationship? There are implications of each of the claims that are made, and we have to think through those. So similarly, that was about worth. So similarly, what does it mean when in regards to value and purpose and meaning if we're just highly evolved animals, or if we're nothing more than matter, or again, that we're made in the image of God who cared enough for humanity that he entered it, sacrificed himself all to restore the relationship? I think the implications of each of those are significantly different, and something that we need to think through as we process our worldview. So leading from implications, they lead us to the fourth thing on our grid, which is actions. And our actions say a lot about our worldview. We may think that we're following a certain worldview, but our actions may be telling a different story. And so the question to help us think through this is, which worldview lines up more honestly and consistently with treating people with love, equality, and grace? And why do you think that? One more time. Which worldview of the ones that we've been exploring line up honestly and consistently with treating people with love, equality, and grace? If we're nothing more than highly evolved animals, does it lend itself to that? If we're pre-programmed computers, does that lend itself to that? Or if we're have inherent value and worth, does it lend itself to that? And another way to look at it here is just the film. The film gave a quote from Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes from the 19th century, and I just wanted to read that. And we'll put it up there. It says, "I see no reason for attributing to man a significant difference in kind from that which belongs to a baboon or a grain of sand." And so if that's true, and we're nothing more than just highly evolved animals, what actions does it inspire? And even more, thinking back to that last question, what does it mean when it comes to social justice and how we treat people? And a final thing for us to think about is that if we are able to live consistently and fully in response to the Christ-centered worldview's view of people, what actions might it inspire? How should we live in response to a God who entered humanity, sacrificed himself for us, and gave us inherent value and meaning just by the fact that he came? This sort of wraps up week 3. If you have any other closing thoughts, or if you have some lingering questions or anything like that, please put it up on the message board, and we'll try to hit it and return to it later. For this week's practice, I like this one. I actually did this with my boys not too long ago. But in light of the question of who are we, and we read from Psalm, we read about King David, who reigned in 1000 BC around that time, and he wrote the Psalm that we read. We want to kind of mimic him a little bit. And one night this week, either by yourself or with your family or friends, go outside and sit or stand under the stars and just read Psalm 8 out loud, just taking in the vastness of space. And imagine all the nights that King David, as a young shepherd, stood under the stars, looking up at the grandeur of God. And just spend a few moments looking up, reflecting on the dual fact that the universe is huge, yet we hold this infinite worth. Have a great week, and we'll see you back for week 4.